Welcome to Talk with Tara, the podcast where we dive into the bold, the funny, and the fascinating. I'm Tara, your host, bringing you unfiltered conversations on life, love, and everything in between. Hit that follow button so you're always in the loop. And now let's get started. Okay, you've asked for her again. You've listened to her. I think this is one of my most favorite guests that I've had, Dr. La Follette. And she is here with us today again for part 2. I'm so grateful. Dr. La Follette has been interested in women's health since she started practicing in 1993. She does research, clinical trials, speaking engagement, and she remains deeply committed to all aspects of women's health span. So you were one of my most popular guests, Dr. La Follette.
Well, it's so good to hear. I certainly love of what I do. And I have to say that maybe it's our community. I've been in Marin County now for over 30 years in practice. And, we may overlap in a few circles. So I'm hoping that it can give good traction and we can go beyond the Bay Area and just keep giving women good information because I love doing so.
Yeah, I know. And you do it so well. I mean, I saw you at a symposium for women and you were so outgoing, had such a great bedside manner, just so full of information, rich knowledge on women's health. And I was just riveted whenever you answered my 50 million questions. I asked so many questions that day. I'm like, I've got to interview her.
Isn't that the point, though, when you go to a symposium in which people are supposed to be telling you about how to live better and fuller? Isn't it the most important thing for us to be able to answer your questions? I always am laughing about when I see the basic scientists talk about supplements and things like that. And there's always someone in the audience that says, so how much vitamin D should I be taking? And they look at you like, I am studying the C. elegans worm. I can tell you that vitamin D doubles the lifespan of a C. elegans worm. I cannot tell you, as I am not an MD, how much to take otherwise. So this basic science to our lives in clinical medicine is such an important place to be and really where the future is, because there's an awful lot of people that have been studying, aging and inflammation and all of the above. But until it gets into our lives in which we can really do something, it doesn't get us further down the line in terms of health span.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, many women see midlife as a turning point. This is like, okay, we were having children and now we're going through perimenopause and menopause and we're in this new phase of our life. So what are the key health habits we can adopt now that really impact longevity? I know that you really care about longevity, so I really want to focus on this today and healthy aging.
Now, if you think about life, right, and if you think about a full life, the first part of your life as a woman having had kids is making sure they don't get run over by a truck, that they make sure they make it to school, that they turn in their homework, and that you can eventually launch them into college. Voila. Yes. All right. That gets you to about mid-40s, depending on whether or not you decided, like most of us, to delay childbearing until mid-30s or beyond, right? Look at the population statistics now, are women in their 40s having kids. So now you get to focus on you. And it's really one of those midlife wake-up calls. And Wendy Suzuki talks about it very well in her book called Healthy Brain, Happy Life, in which she wakes up as a professor of neurobiology at NYU, and she's 40 pounds overweight than she wants to be, and she doesn't have a family, and what is she doing?
Yep.
So our job is to figure out, okay, what am I doing? What can I do? And how do I stick to it? All right. Yep. Now, there's a lot of people out there giving you advice.
And especially how do you stick to it? Because we can find out what to do, but sticking to it can be tough.
Yes, of course it is. Because when are you going to carve out the time? Are you going to do it before the kids are getting to high school? Are the kids in college? You're making sure they're okay? Okay, what about your own job? So if you think about it, the only way this will work is we can adopt small tidbits of things that we already do and we add to it. So that's the idea of Atomic Habits, James Glass's book. But the other person that this initially was actually out of Stanford, something called Teeny Habits. But the point being is, let's talk about what you can do easily without any fail, and that is walking and exercise. I think the problem with these laundry lists of what you can do for longevity is that's exactly what they are. And they will stay in the laundry room and not get into your life if you're not able to figure out how you add them. to your life. So walking. It's so interesting. So I am a big exercise person, and I have been using Whoop with this wonderful,
Whoop.
yes, the Whoop for the last 8 years. And
Okay.
Whoop contacted Dr. Eric Verdun, who's the head of the Buck Institute of Aging, and has now put in a feature called the Whoop Age.
Oh,
Now, for many of us who are a little bit on the perfectionist side,
myself.
you want to know how you can have your Whoop age be less than your biologic age. Well, guess what? In my case, it is, and I keep trying to tweak it. So, what's tweaking, right?
Yeah.
Walking.
Oh, I love
5 days a
walking.
week, 7 to 10,000 steps a day
Okay.
is number one on the aging movement,
Mhm.
a biologic age, chronologic age thing. The second is weight training, resistance training. Okay, now what do you have to do? A half an hour a week. Hello.
That's it?
10 minutes, 3 days is half an hour a week. Don't go crazy. The problem is, Tara, and you know this, if we start to try to do everything in a day, we won't do it 3 days in a row. Number one, we'd be too sore. And number two, it's like, how can I possibly do that? I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you have to, but what's so interesting about the steps is I find myself as I'm seeing patients, and maybe there's a gap because either the schedule gave me a lunch break, God forbid, or somebody went into labor and is not in my office. I will literally go around the top floor of the little office that I live in and get 5 minutes of walking. All right.
Yeah.
That adds 1,000, 2,000 steps a day. That is nothing. And yet, boy, does that move my Whoop age in terms of my biologic age
Oh,
down.
that's so interesting.
Isn't
That's
it?
really good. Yeah, it's good. Walking is so easy. You could do it with a friend, after work or at lunchtime or your lunch break. It's just so easy to do. I walk all the time. I walk a ton. So I've been curious about this Whoop because I use a Fitbit, and I'd love to know what my
Whoop ages.
Whoop age is.
So the thing that's so interesting about Whoop versus Fitbit versus Aura is they're all trying to give us biologic information that may make a difference in terms of staying healthy. So I love that. Now, some of them are better than others. I happen to think that Whoop and probably Aura are the two sort of foremost. Whoop was designed by an competitive Division I squash player at Harvard, and Aura came out organically in a different way from Europe. But I think the points are there some interesting. One, steps, walking, resistance training, sleep. Okay, so your Fitbit does give you the components of sleep.
It does.
And does it give you components of sleep that you can actually work on?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So number one, consistency of going to bed.
Mm-hmm. True.
Number two, how much are you drinking before you go to bed? A glass of wine will change your REM sleep. It'll change your deep sleep.
One glass changes it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a little bit depressing, actually. So you might want to not look at your Whoop on the days you decide to have a drink or two. But it really does change. And you can feel it, actually. Most women in menopause and perimenopause can really feel how sleep is affected by alcohol. Sorry to tell you, it's true. And by the way, while we're on the topic of alcohol, why does this wine have to be 14% alcohol? Why don't we just do 8? Why don't we do 6?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why does it have to be so potent?
Right. That's a good point.
It's such a simple thing. And the wine industry is having a tough time because young people are flipping to sort of hard alcohol. I'm not sure that's good, but okay. But let's get a concentration of alcohol that is a little bit more reasonable and maybe in the single digits rather than the double digits.
Right. Right.
But the point I'm talking about in terms of being able to live better and longer is some of these components you can handle, and some of these components you won't have as much control. But sleep is one of them. Get a good routine. Turn off your phone. Make sure you're reading a book before you go to bed. Turn off the stimulation. If you haven't had a chance to work out that day and you work out late, you're going to have to go to bed later because you're still revved up from that. So there really are some things, and those are the 3 big components of longevity.
Your sleep hygiene. So it's important to go to sleep at the same time. Why is reading kind of a sleep aid? Because it is. I mean, I read and it's just like, boop, I fall asleep.
Exactly. And I think it's sleep aid because there's no blue light coming at it. I don't read off of a Kindle, although I think you can see that the light is different on a Kindle compared to your book.
I like a
And
book. I like an
me
old
too, me
fashioned
too,
book. Yeah.
me too.
Yeah.
And I think
I do notice that really helps reading.
it really makes a difference. So if you can work on walking, you can work on resistance training, you could, which is both weights as well as resistance, and you can work on sleep, you will have now made the biggest impact in terms of your biologic age and your health span. So
Okay.
those,
That's interesting. Sorry for interrupting.
no, go ahead. I
No,
think
I
it's,
was, yeah. I was just saying the wine, like, it's hard, especially on the weekend. Somebody wants to go out to dinner and have a glass of wine, but just be prepared that it's going to affect your sleep. So that's interesting. And also the working out, like some people don't have a choice and they work out after work and they didn't get home till they're 8. What about sauna?
oh my gosh, sauna's terrific, by the way.
Yeah.
It's really terrific. In fact, every sauna company out there should now be contacting you because we should all be putting in saunas in our house. What's so interesting is my father moved us from Europe in 1971 to the house that we still own on Russian Hill. And he put in a sauna.
Oh,
And you
nice.
look at the data, and
Uh-huh.
he's 96 now and still alive. And you're like, oh my goodness, he was ahead of his time. He believed in seatbelts across the chest. So he put
Yes.
those in his car that he bought in Europe from Mercedes, and he put them all in, had them put in 1964, and he put in a sauna. Can you imagine? And of course, he moved to California, which frankly, I think people do understand how important it is to wind down, to meditate, to get out in nature and recognize we live in a beautiful place. We're not dealing with sleet and ice like the East Coast and Texas and the rest of that whole swath of the country that just had that terrible storm. And our
Yeah.
job is to get out and take advantage of where we live.
Well, we do have a lot of international listeners now. And in Denmark, I noticed Belgium, I have listeners all over the world, Germany, UK, and they don't have our weather. But they do have a treadmill and they can listen to a podcast like this one and get on their treadmill and get their steps in.
Exactly.
Right. And they
Exactly.
can go into their sauna and help their inflammation and help their sleep because apparently the sauna also helps your sleep. And I wanted to talk to you about sleep because one of the biggest complaints I hear from women in midlife when I'm out to dinner with them is that their sleep is really affected. And some of them have insomnia. I know we're going through mental health changes. Menopause is affecting our mental health. Let's talk about ways that if we can't shut our minds down, what happens to us when our cortisol goes up? How do we get it back down? Is there any remedy for that when we are feeling that anxious feeling?
Well, I think that if we break down the hormonal transitions from what I call the more difficult premenopausal stage to the relatively more stable postmenopausal stage, we can sort of break this down. Because one of the things that most women who come to talk to me in their 40s, typically it's in their mid 40s, about premenopause is the mental health disturbance. It's anxiety, it's feeling as though you don't have control of your reactions. You have more rage. As somebody said, I'm mad and sad. These are real. And if you start to listen to some really bright people, Pauline Mackey is one of them, who talks about, she's both a neuroscientist and an OBGYN. She's both psychiatry as well as OBGYN in Chicago. She talks about the vicissitudes of hormonal changes in the perimenopausal phase, which are far more disruptive because of the mental aspect. And that is something that is really tough to deal with because bleeding is still happening, but you can't control how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think when you start to look at habits and you start to look at ways in which you can control your reactions, right? So number one, you wake up with this sense of dread. Why am I waking up with a sense of dread?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, something's going on because all of a sudden you didn't have your house roof blow off and you're still in the same place you were the night before. So, get out, go for a walk, look where you live, take some stock in what you have in front of you with gratitude. And that isn't easy. And it's really not easy if you have teenagers who are never cleaning their room and there's all the other things that are going on. But I think it's very important to understand that how you're feeling in the perimenopause transition is absolutely hormonal.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to get to somebody who can help you. And it isn't easy. There are multiple prongs, and I will go through exactly what we talked about in terms of these habits to help. But it is tough. And because it keeps changing, it's more tough, right? Whereas
Yeah.
when you finally start skipping periods and you have night sweats and you have maybe hot flashes, I can fix that because
Mm-hmm.
you're at a better steady state. But the emotional fluxes in perimenopause are real and they're tough and they have to be approached slowly and deliberately.
And then how do you approach that? What's your approach, and how can it help your sleep once you have these remedies?
Well, I'm going to go back to the 3 tiers we talked about. So, my rule about exercise is I don't know when I'm going to exercise. I don't even know what I'm going to do, but I know I'm going to exercise.
Okay.
So, don't beat yourself up that you couldn't do it at 6 in the morning. Don't
Yeah.
beat yourself up that you couldn't do it on your lunch break. Although, by the way, take a 5-minute walk. I mean, that doesn't hurt anybody, right? That's
Right.
easily done. Just remember to add it. And don't worry if you can't even do it before dinner, although it's probably better if you can. But if you can't, none of us eat so much or such Division I athletes that we can't get on a treadmill or a Stairmaster or a Peloton
Right.
after
Right.
dinner,
Right.
right?
True.
Right? Do 30 minutes, do 10 minutes of weights. Boom. Next day, do 10 minutes of lower body. Boom. Walk more. And then I'm really careful about talking about alcohol. I
Okay.
really have to say we live in the wine country. It's easy to have a glass of wine. It's 14% alcohol. It's going to disrupt your sleep. I can tell you, you start to look at the recoveries on the Whoop, and they're literally now have this little AI chat box talking to you about, so, you had a glass of wine yesterday and the day before. What are you going to do about it? So
Yeah.
it can come across, of course, as sort of like scolding on the one hand. So we have to be careful about how we talk about this. But there's this wonderful book that just came out, Cecily Mack, who is a contemporary and in this county, who's talking about undimmed. And this idea that the stimulants and the what we drink and what we eat does affect how we react.
Mm.
Whether it's coffee in the morning, which, by the way, I'm never going to give up, but I do have my cup of coffee. And yes, it does raise my heart rate. And the wine at night, you are dimming your perception and your ability to sort of recognize, oh, maybe things are a little different here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really important to try to stick to, okay, what other things are you doing to try to make up the difference? I know that when I was spending an awful lot of time on labor and delivery on call, I know that I would literally have coffee sort of throughout the day.
Yeah.
And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that I was trying to make up for sleep deprivation with a stimulant. Now, look,
Mm-hmm.
caffeine's pretty harmless. And by the way,
Right.
for everybody who's pregnant and otherwise, it's totally safe and maybe good for all of us in small quantities. But
Mm-hmm.
check what you're doing to make up the difference on how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Check in with yourself. Give yourself the serenity to be able to go, well, now hang on a second. Why did I do that 3 nights in a row? Or why did I go out with my girlfriends and have that second or third glass? Just check. There's no judgment here. It's just trying to improve this very difficult time in your life in which there's so many things changing that you don't have control of a lot,
Yeah.
and try to minimize the effect on
Well,
others.
does the starting the HRT in your 40s when you're having these signs of depression are one of the fixes to get your hormones more stable?
Yes, thank goodness we're having this revolution about HRT. Those of us who have been prescribing hormones since the 90s, for crying out loud, it's like finally this sort of what I would say the Naomi Watts' generation has finally sort of gotten outraged about the fact that many people weren't offered it. But many of us continue to offer hormones from all this time and to pivot into what's bioidentical and body identical, as they call in the UK. Yes. Now here's the trick, right? If you're still cycling and you're adding hormones, you might be then chasing bleeding. So what are you swapping? Bleeding for mood? I'll
I
take
would.
bleeding over mood. Yes, you would too.
Yeah. I take mood. Mood is more important. I can handle the bleeding, but
That's right.
being in a funky mood and yelling at people that you love and ladies, just so you know, if you're doing that, it's not that you're abnormal. That's what you're saying. This is part of our cycle and there's ways to fix it, and exercise, HRT, cutting the wine, because alcohol is a depressant. It's going to make you even feel sad the next day. I have a friend who suffers from depression, and she was a big wine drinker, and she said she had to stop the wine because it was like a cycle. She'd drink the wine to help the depression, but then the depression would be worse because she drinks the wine. So she had to completely give up the wine and start exercising and staying on her medication. And it's been a game changer for her. So that's a really, really good recommendation. I know you really care about longevity. Tell us about your involvement with the Buck Institute.
So for those of you who don't know, the Buck Institute of Aging has been around for 20 years. And they have been studying organisms, including C. elegans that I talked about, the worm, and mice and fruit flies and other species, to understand how small changes in diet or fasting or glucose will change the longevity of these very simple organisms. So there's a lot of science there, and there's a lot of data there. And now they are starting to have people that can look and manipulate the data to understand this robust amount of information and see if we can start to translate it into how it affects our human lives.
So do you know anything about peptides? And all over Instagram and TikTok, we hear GLP-1, GLP-1, GLP-1. Oprah just did a podcast on GLP-1s herself and how it's been a game changer. And the doctor on that show that wrote the book, I don't remember the name of the book, but she was saying basically GLP-1s are like blood pressure medicine. You really, once you start, you really have got to take them your entire life. And I'm hearing things like your labia shrinks and gets too skinny from taking these GLP-1s, and that you're losing bone density. And there are some side effects like your gallbladder, and things can happen that are not great. But then I'm hearing these other people say, oh God, they're like game changers. They changed my life. So what is your take on these GLP-1s? What have you heard?
Well, I think there's what you hear and what you've read and what's out there in terms of the science of it. So let's just talk about the first peptide ever discovered. That was insulin, 1922.
Okay.
Right. So then the generation of the GLP-1s that have been around for 10 years now, maybe even 12, they did sort of a couple of interesting things. They're called glucagon-like peptides, and they have an effect on the brain in terms of food noise and the gut in terms of satiety, feeling full, and glucose in the pancreas and glucagon in the intestine. So you have all these multiple organs that are interacting. The net result is decreases gastric motility, so people get full sooner, decreases glucose after a meal and after sugar, because it literally tamps down the hyperglycemia. It changes the way you think about food, even though we don't think we're addicted to food. We clearly are addicted to food.
Yeah.
And long term, it likely is making a huge cardiovascular risk decrease over time. Now, the studies are interesting about this, and I'm going to the two GLP-1s that most people have heard about are Ozempic, right, which is semaglutide, and then Mounjaro tirzepatide and Zepbound. That's the same medicine. One's for diabetes, one's for weight loss. Semaglutide was sort of the first GLP-1. It doesn't have this other effect that tirzepatide has. But the thing that's so interesting about it is they really made a difference. Well, they're making a difference on sugar. They're making a difference on your gut. And they're making a difference in terms of your brain. So I don't know too many medicines that can do all that in one.
I know.
Right? So, and the synthetic version of them has a half-life of, much, much longer, 5 days. The injections much, much longer than what the natural occurring ones have.
Mm.
So you're getting a longer pronounced effect with them, and you're really able to see a difference. Now, let's talk about heart health.
Yes.
For those of us who are a little bit cynical about how much research did not happen in women, and that it was 1993 before the NIH required that studies include women for their prospective randomized control studies, and that according to the new administration, we are actually under DEI. Who knew I was under DEI as a woman? But that caveat being said, there aren't a lot of good studies looking at decreased cardiovascular risk for women because most of the studies were looking at men.
Mm.
So if we start to look at how does it affect cardiovascular risk, of course, we have to do a long study. There's a huge meta-analysis of 100,000 patients. And they showed that there was, both with semaglutide and tirzepatide, so both of the two that are the most studied and available now, there was a 12% decrease in all causes mortality. There was a 13% decrease in cardiovascular mortality and a 13% decrease in cardiovascular events that led to, did not lead to death. Wow. Okay, how's that happening? It's changing some of the lipid profile for sure. Peptides, the tirzepatide is 39 amino acids. I mean, these are little teeny molecules. And the problem with the peptides in general is that they are small, they are very evanescent in vivo, and they have some specific targets, but you got to get them in to make a difference. So the therapeutic window of peptides is going to be, interestingly enough, in things like antimicrobial resistance, right? So you're going to make a little peptide and you're going to connect it with a nanoparticle, and you're going to be able to attack a bug that's now become a superbug because because it's resistant to most of the antibiotics.
So that's going to be the next step with peptides? Wow. That's
There's
incredible.
There's two. There's also the anti-cancer effect. So little peptides can get into the cell membrane and disrupt it. Wow. So imagine connecting a nanoparticle to a peptide that is going on cancer cells, and you're literally right?
That's incredible.
So these are dramatic. So, but if you look at the review, there's a big review that came out in 2025 that came out of India. This is brilliant. But the trials are not, they're not, ready for clinical medicine yet, but they're in the pipeline.
Yeah.
So we will be able to work on antibacterial resistance.
Wow.
We'll be able to work on cancer, and we will be able to work on, tumors in the brain, things that literally we haven't had an opportunity to do much for.
That is amazing. And is this all started because of finding out starting with insulin?
Yes, I think what happened is that once the technology was available to make the half-life triple and, go, and then the bioavailability lengthened because you put other molecules on top of these amino acids so that they can't be biodegraded in vivo as much as they were in natural occurrences. You are now literally synthetically engineering a targeted peptide that can help you. So it's really exciting, but not ready yet for prime time, despite the fact that you're hearing everybody try them. I just don't know whether any of the current formulations that are available for humans do what they should do,
right?
Because I don't know how robust the nanoparticle science as well as the synthetic, preparations are. Certainly their clinical studies have not been yet published for us to be able to say, okay, let's all start taking them.
Well, you see a lot of women in your practice, the ones that are on GLP-1s. What are they saying to you? Are they saying like, wow, this has been amazing, a game changer? Are they complaining? What are you hearing?
Well, I think it's really important that we understand that if this generation of physicians and providers can help the obesity epidemic in the United States, we will decrease hospital admissions by 2/3.
Wow.
I don't think anybody should ever underestimate that if we don't start talking about prevention and we don't start talking about how we can prevent you, pre-diabetic menopausal patient, to not become diabetic, then we're not doing our jobs. Because if we can, and obesity is alive and well, and somewhere between 60% of women and 50% of men in this country. And we know it when we go to Europe, right? You go to Europe and you're like, oh my God, there we are. The Americans, they stick out like a sore thumb because we're so heavy. And all of us included, certainly there have been times in my life in which I've been heavier than I wanted to be and struggled with weight loss. But the reality is that as a physician, this category of medicines will change our survival and the things that happen with diabetes, which is unable to walk, vascular problems, cognitive function, weight, joint problems. Think of all the people that are getting joint replacements that because they're too heavy. How is that joint going to last if you haven't addressed the number one problem, which was your weight?
But I was just thinking, is it going to give people an excuse to go to the all-you-can-eat diner?
Well, no. The thing about tirzepatide, which is a little different than semaglutide, is that you really do get full quickly.
Okay, yeah.
And that's not a fun feeling. It's not a fun feeling. So you get bloated. Remember, your gastrointestinal transit time has slowed down. By the way, that's, what's happening in pregnancy too. So, some people can remember what that feels like. Yeah. Not something you want to reproduce every day, God knows. But I think that we will learn to better dose these. I think we will have me and other providers we have a perfectly good brain on our heads. Why aren't we helping everybody with this? Why do most women have to go to 3 different people to get what they need, right? And
this is true.
Right? I will also be very clear that the naturopaths who have been out in front on these medicines, good for them. Thank goodness, because they've been around for a decade. I think I talked to you last time about Zachary Knight's podcast, 10 years. And the first line in his podcast talking to Huberman is no diet works. Okay, well, you don't have to be Oprah Winfrey to know that that's true.
Right.
Right? Come on. I mean, and my idea of dieting dates back to the 80s, which is just don't eat. That doesn't work either, right? So we're learning that you need to add calories, and then you need to and then you need to figure out what kind of calories, and a protein is not the same as a sugar. We have all this metabolic health stuff we need to know. But if we can focus on diabetes prevention before diabetes sets in, we will change American medicine. And that's what these medicines are showing. Wow, and that also includes, lipid profiles too, that, triglycerides.
Cholesterol.
Yeah.
So, they were saying the cholesterol goes down. Also, I've heard that it slightly helps with Alzheimer's in the brain and plaque.
Yeah, hard to know yet. Even the conversations about HRT, we got rid of this black box warning, thank God, finally on HRT. Yes. We do not know that somebody at midlife starting on HRT will have less of a risk of Alzheimer's in 10 and 15 and 20 years later. We don't know that yet. Is it because we haven't studied it? Well, we have 10 years of data. And in 10 years, the answer is it doesn't do any harm. Okay, that's about as weak a message you can say. Doesn't do any harm. But it's better than saying it does, I guess. And it's better than having people not use it because they're scared for breast cancer, which is no longer the issue and never was. And was, misrepresented in the media. But our job as, educators and as providers is to make sure we can help women and men understand how important it is to control blood sugar. And this particular medicine hits 4 or 5 organ systems that will make it really change the dial in terms of, health for this country.
Well,
and
people want to know. People want to know what are the side effects? I mean, there has to be some side effects.
Okay, so there's a 0.9% thyroid cancer rate, so it's quite small, but it exists. There is some gallbladder inflammation, again, small, but exists. But the reason why people stop is because of the bloating and the constipation and the fullness. It's not comfortable for many people. And yes, the lower dosing gets you there with less weight loss quickly, but it'll help those symptoms. And over time, you may be able to get get over that. But it's not this is not for the faint of heart. And right now, of course, there's still injections, right?
Yes.
Weekly injections. So many people are like, what? I'm not going to do that. But
So
do
you offer it at your practice?
Yes. So it's fabulous. You should ask. I am in the process of pivoting. I want to be able to. It's such an interesting thing in medicine. Whereas I had no trouble immediately adopting the HPV vaccine when the pediatricians were hemming and hawing about the cost of that vaccine. I just said, look, that's fine. Let me, I told the Merck rep, do the HPV vaccination for all the moms. I'll bring all the kids in. I will do it. The pediatricians run a very tight ship. They don't have a big surplus of extra money to be able to buy a vaccine that's expensive. I'll keep it in my fridge and I will vaccinate the county. And that was in 2004. I had no trouble with that. Mm-hmm. So why am I having the reluctance about starting a new medicine that seems to me so dramatic? So I ask myself this every day, and I'm now trying to pivot. I want to be able to feel as though I'm educated, that I can help people. And of course, how about just the insurances? I mean, right now, women and men can go to Lilly Direct for $99 a month and get the meds. Well, okay, that's interesting. Who's following them? How are they checking? What's happening? I want to know that you're not losing too quickly. Mm-hmm. So the reason why these meds are for life is because if you change your body to the set point of a BMI that's, let's call it in the low 20s. Let's just make a number up to certainly under 30, right? Yes. So a BMI in the 20s, right? Your body believes that you used to be at 32%, a BMI of 32. Every single thing that you eat is going to try to get it back up there because it's used to that set point. Yeah. So if you look at the people that have been in diet books, there's a guy named Pierre Ducan who wrote a book, I don't know, probably 20 years now, called The Ducan Diet. And he was the first person having dieted all my life. I mean, at 7, I remember if I ate a candy bar, I was going to be wearing it. I'm 7 years old. I mean, give me a break.
And you're thinking this, yeah.
I'm thinking this, shouldn't be thinking this. And I'm running around like crazy. But let me just say that the thing that's so interesting about that is that if you do not realize that your body has to be twice as long at the set point before it actually realizes it doesn't want to go back up to 32, you'll just go back up. You will not just be a nincompoop and eat more, although many people may, but most people try damn hard to stay lean again. And your body goes, nah, you've been for 5 years up there. You're down here. I've seen you be down here before. It's not staying. So how many years do we need to be on? We're saying for life because it's an easier thing to say. Mm-hmm. It may turn out that 2 years, 3 years, depending on how long it took you, the slower you lose weight, the more likely it's going to stay off. How long you can stay at the steady state of this new weight. How can you train your brain to change the way you eat and desire food, drink, etc.?
Yes.
What behavioral modifications are you doing to keep yourself at this steady state? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's probably 2 years right there, maybe 3, right?
Yeah. So that makes sense to start slow, to microdose. There's this, microdosing idea. Right. And it makes, I wonder if does your stomach shrink actually, not filling it up? Does it kind of, because I noticed like when I was young, when I was like maybe in my teens, I could go and I could have a salad bar and I could eat a lot from the salad bar. And then I started to really say, I'm going to stop when I feel satiated. I'm not going to feel full. I'm just going to feel good. And then my stomach got used to that. It didn't want the full feeling anymore. It wanted to just be like, I'm good. And now I only eat when I feel good. I don't feel full. And my brain has been trained to do that. So I wonder if we're on these medications long enough, our brain, like you said, neuroplasticity will talk to our stomach and say, you're fine. You don't need any more food.
Absolutely. And that's what you hope is going to happen. And you want it to happen because it's too hard otherwise. Right. Yeah. And so I think and that's why I'm saying as providers, we really need to get to understand where people are living and try to help them because this is not easy. And you bet that you will need less to feel full, but you have to stop the conversation in your head going, I need more.
Right. Exactly.
I always remember thinking, what do I need? I have a roof over my head. I have a steady job. I have a wonderful family. Do I really need another bowl of ice cream? I mean, Where
Right.
do we feel that we were deprived of this caloric restriction? It's sort of like you have to feel differently about that too. And you have to give yourself permission to say, hey, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked about, I just want to kind of summarize some of the things we talked about, and then I want to move on to the next question. We talked about sleep and habits to, have better sleep. And then we talked about peptides and what they can do and what they may do in the future, which is huge. Um, I wanted to talk about bone density. I know that we've talked about this before. I have a question. Does it make sense to know your bone density before 65? Because the recommendation is 65. And I went to my general doctor and I said, I'd like to get my bone density checked. She said, what's the point? Like, why do it? Is that
Okay.
true?
No.
Okay.
So let me start right there.
Mm-hmm.
There's always these wonderful people that are up there trying to understand medicine and tell you what you should be doing. And then they, by the way, convince the insurance company that that's what they're going to be paying for. So we're in a little bit of a soup twice here. But if you look at prevention, I can't fix your osteoporotic bone as easily at 65 as I can your osteopenia at 50. We know and have known since the 60s and 70s
Mm-hmm.
that the most rapid time of bone loss is 5 years after menopause.
Okay.
So those 5 years, you'll see a decline. Now, I don't know if that, when they told that to us, it's 20% of people. Some people don't lose bone ever, but okay. But that's when you're going to be the most vulnerable. So to me, you take those two pieces of information, and anybody who's entering perimenopause or menopausal needs a bone density.
Okay.
That is 15 years earlier than 65.
I don't know why they don't change the recommendation. I mean,
No
it's
kidding.
better for the insurance companies because then they don't have to deal with osteoporosis.
But this is the mindset. We have to start thinking prevention rather than fixing disease.
Right, right,
All of medicine is paying for disease.
right. Fix.
Stop already.
Mm-hmm.
Get it before the disease
Prevention.
is there.
Yep.
Right?
No more fixing, prevention.
I mean,
Has
it's
to
a
be
lot
brand.
easier
Yeah,
to
yeah,
prevent than to fix
yeah.
because we don't have good fixes. Look at all the things that happen to people that are diabetic. I mean, we do not have good fixes. Amputation is not great.
No.
Cardiovascular failure is not great. Obesity is not great. These are huge things, and in this country, particularly relevant. And I think that we have to start backing up and saying, all right, you don't want to pay for something that I know I can do something about when you're in your 50s and I really can't fix in your 60s or 65 or
Right.
70. That, this is backwards. It's backwards. So I have started, and I think I started this about 10 years ago, something like that. And I knew what the population recommendation was. But remember, I'm an OBGYN, so people don't think about OBGYNs as primary cares, even though everybody stays with you because you've delivered their kids. So you end up being a primary care in the second part of your career because you've had the people that you delivered 20 years ago, right? So you better darn well get better on primary care. So this has been my education for the last 10 years going forward. I try to get everybody's bone density right away at 50.
So where do you do it? Where does one do it? I know there was a place in San Francisco. I was scheduled and then I went there and then they canceled my appointment when I walked in. And is a DEXA scan the right thing? Is that what you get?
Yeah. So there's a couple of DEXA scans that are interesting. There's the traditional DEXA scan that looks at vertebral body, so spine, and looks at hip.
Okay.
All right. So that's the traditional one. By the way, you can get it right when you get your mammogram, and it takes 2 minutes, and you don't even have to take your clothes off, and there's no dye, and there's no IV, and it's just the simplest thing in the whole
But the mammogram place charges like $1,500, where
All
this
right.
other place was $100. Uh-huh.
So that's exactly right. Now, how do we compare that to the $100 bus or a van that's going around Marin called Body Scan? So my job as a provider is to understand that body composition and bone go together, right? So the thing that's so great about these body scans or in body, these machines that you can get on their scales that look at your composition, is that why is bone changing? Bone is changing for two reasons. You have, I think I've given you the sort of commercial take of what happens in bone. You have the osteoblasts that are the builders. You have the osteoclasts that are the chewers. The builders quit in menopause. The chewers keep going.
Oh, okay.
right? If the chewers keep going and the builders are sleeping, guess what happens?
Oh,
Lose bone, right?
okay.
So we need to wake up the builders, right?
And the
So
builders are muscle, like weight
well,
training,
exactly. So the builders can
repping.
be they can be injectable medicines, they can be monoclonal. There's a bunch of medicines that are going to basically deal with this balance of chewers and builders. But the point on the exercise is that the bone, the muscle, and the tendon are attached to the bone. So if you start to work on muscle, you're connecting those three things together and helping. So there are companies that are literally, there's one in Berkeley called Groove Health that works on resistance training for osteoporotic women and probably osteopenic women also. So you have a program, you have a resistance program, you have a weight program to make this and do it early, right before you're osteoporotic. But if you are osteoporotic, let's try to keep it better or maybe build bone back, which is really what we want to do. So there's three things that I want to know about somebody's bone density. What is it? What's your body composition? Are you leaching calcium from some other reason because the kidneys aren't working the way they're supposed to? And where's your resistance training program? I guess that's 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have to really understand that this is on us as a program moving forward. And I think I said to you before, how is it that the NFL can have a player break an ankle and be back on the field in my mind, ridiculously short interval? And we cannot help the half of the population that has bad bone at 50.
Right.
I mean, hello,
Yeah.
where are we here?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, what is the difference between the one at the mammogram and the one that's $120?
Yeah. So the $120 one will give you the body composition.
Oh,
And
okay.
body fat. I'll give you the muscle and I'll give you the bone. Now, one of the things that I think we talked about, and I think they're pretty close, was is the DEXA that is the one that you're getting at the mammogram place for too much money. And we should, by the way, go back to them and say, please give us a cash price. And the one that's in the van, are the metrics of that bone the same? And do they compare? So the answer is pretty close. There's a third scanning device, and it starts with an M that I'm just learning about, that may actually give us a better idea of the bone composition and the dynamism of your class and blast, right? So I'm learning about that also. And I know, as usual, the naturopaths are out front on this in terms of understanding it. But we have to address bone density because it is so rare for me to see a normal bone density in a 50-year-old.
Oh, wow.
I'm not even
Interesting.
going to talk to you
What
about
about calcium and vitamin D? Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
We eat pretty well.
Okay.
So, calcium somewhere between 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day. You're getting it a lot in some of the foods. Vitamin D for sure. And we check vitamin D. Vitamin D helps with inflammation. It helps with, it's one of the first things we saw in longevity at the Buck in terms of doubling the lifespan of the C. elegans worm. So, those are clearly dietary things that'll make a difference. But you really want to create the dynamism of the class and the blast to stay steady state. And why in midlife, when we still have a lot of life ahead of us, are our class and blast not talking to each other? And how can we not get the blast to wake up? That should be, the Nobel Prize next, in my view.
Another peptide.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it is. And there are probably people that are smarter than me that know even more about it. But that's been my clinical dilemma as I get bone densities now in the 15 years before the recommendation. And now what do I do with it? How can I help you? How can I make it better?
Yeah. Okay. I have another question about sleep that I forgot to ask you earlier. So I had a time when I'm sleeping okay now, but I had a time when I wasn't sleeping. And what my doctor gave me is she told me to take Ambien for 3 days, whether I needed it or not, just take it. And I did what she said. It really helped because what would happen is I'd get into bed and I'd be like, what if I don't sleep? What if I don't sleep?
Mm-hmm.
And then that would make me feel even more anxious and then I wouldn't sleep. What would be your protocol? What would be your recommendation for women? Because not sleeping is a really bad feeling. It really is. It creates a lot of anxiety because you're like, oh God, I got to wake up. I've got to work the next morning. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And I'm not sleeping. And then I'm going to catch a cold and I'm going to have a bad immune system. And you play this whole thing in your head and then you don't sleep. And how does cortisol, how do you lower your cortisol? Is that possible? Is that your cortisol going up and making you feel that kind of anxious feeling and your heart rate go up?
I think anxiety plays a role, and cortisol and anxiety are tied. So there's no question that if you're worried about sleeping, it's going to be hard for you to sleep.
Yeah.
So you have to turn off your head.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And that's what the, the basically Ambien and the like do. The problem with sleep, if you look at the, those of us who are a little bit purist in terms of sleep, is you want restorative sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So those medicines get you to sleep, but you don't get the restorative function of sleep in the same way.
Okay.
So yes, it got you over the hump because you're going to be thinking and spiraling and not helping yourself. But you need to do cognitive behavioral therapy, which is now available online with, a company called Muna Health, but that taking the Stanford cognitive behavioral therapy and putting it online to help women with insomnia sleep, which happens a lot in perimenopause.
Yeah.
But the reality is we are trying to get restorative sleep. So it's not just good enough to be asleep. We need to be able to recharge our battery. We need to be able to basically get our immune system to fix all the things that went sideways during the day.
Right.
So you want the restorative sleep. So that's the problem a little bit with these meds, is they get you to sleep. And in your case, it was a great recommendation and good for your doctor to say, okay, look, let's just break this cycle. This is ridiculous.
The cycle.
Let's get you better. Let's restore sleep and sanity. And then let's figure out a way forward.
Yeah. And that was good. It really worked because I was like, okay, I'm going to take this whether I sleep or not. And then I slept. And then your body kind of forgets that you had that anxious night of non-sleep. It's kind of like, it's like having a child. You don't remember what it felt like without the epidural. Like you forget.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, exactly.
So that's
right
really
back.
good.
The second one's coming on the way, but yes, exactly. And one of these is some of this is just solving the problem for the current acuteness of your worry. Right. And in other words, you aren't doing great right now. You're not sleeping, and that is a bad state.
Yeah.
So fix that short-term problem and let's get a long-term solution once we've reset this anxious negative spiral.
Right. Exactly.
So there's a short-term answer and a long-term answer. And let's never forget that we should be in the hall for both of them.
Yep. And what about serotonin as it declines? Does it decline as we get older? How do we tell if it's like depression or if it's our hormones? How do you tell the difference? That's really interesting. And, what are the clues for that?
Yes. And I think we have to have a whole podcast on perimenopausal mood changes.
Yeah.
Because it is easy to assume it's a serotonin norepinephrine uptake, and it may very well be, but it also is hormonal. And we don't want to pigeonhole people into taking meds that we haven't talked about. These are the approaches that we can have with the vicissitudes of mood in perimenopause. And some of them may work and some of them may not work, and some of them will be cyclic and some of them will be forever. And we need to do a better job at breaking down the components to figure out, well, you're probably actually going to need that SSRI. And that's going to help you more than me giving you a patch. But it's so individual and it depends on your background. Did you have a episode in high school? How was college? Yeah. Did you have terrible postpartum depression? Remember, I'm in for the whole life of, your health, right? And that includes high school, college, pregnancy, menopause, cancer.
Yeah, what's your history? Okay, I have a question about sex. Do women still want to have sex in their 70s and 80s, or are we doomed? Like after a certain age, we're dry and we don't want to have sex, and we don't have I know there's the saying dirty old man. So I think men still want to have sex at any age, whether they can or not. That's a different situation. But what about women? What do you see in your practice?
So I think, first of all, many women still want to have sex. And I think there's a very interesting dialogue going on now about the menopausal changes that happen in, what's called the GSM of menopause, which is genitourinary symptoms of menopause, which involve vaginal dryness and bladder instability and all the rest of it, which can be fixed, by the way. treated hormonally with the laser, with, some behavioral modification with pelvic floor. All of those people and modalities need to be talked about and helped. But I think that one of the problems that we have in this particular, last generation of, erectile dysfunction ads is that, okay, guys, thrilled you guys can get it up. Where are you going?
Yeah.
And why aren't we talking about what we need?
Right.
So are we having a libido problem, or are they having a, getting it up problem that's been solved that hasn't actually gone to where is it going?
Right.
So I think we have to say, all right, now hang on, let's look back on what was my libido at 18 and 17, and am I having sexual fantasies, and am I interested? Because the parts are all there.
Yeah.
So it should darn well work. But are we being sort of pushed into the conversation about libido because we're with partners and this background noise of erectile dysfunction and the solution that is paid for by all insurances across all the years that it's been paid for?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, guys, where are you going? Where is the matching other part?
Right.
And so, I'm not even talking about, men with men or men with women or any of the all of the armamentarium that comes with all of the choices that people have in terms of their sex life. But, where is fantasy? Where is libido? Where is sleep? I so remember when my kids were little, all I wanted was sleep. I mean,
yes.
my goodness, I don't need any, I'm already breastfeeding. What do I need
know.
to put on me? It's sort of, you do have to at some point
yes.
go, is this real for us, or is it real for our reaction in terms of what you are saying?
Yeah.
And until we're actually clear to say, the reality is women in their 60s are having as much sex as women in their 20s, and they are typically in a stable monogamous relationship. So good news, it continues to happen.
That's good news.
And it's a priority as for many women as they age. And our job is to make sure that there is what I call a sexual match, the partner, both.
Yes. Yes. Okay, good. So we're not doomed. We're not doomed. We
No.
can have sex up into our 70s, 80s, as long as we want,
90s.
because there's solutions. 90s. Yeah, they say there's a lot of sex in the senior citizen home.
Well, I can't get pregnant, so that works.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that's really good to hear. Now, just so everybody knows that you do offer laser Mona Lisa. We talked about that, or not Mona Lisa.
Yes,
Is
that's
that
called
what it's
Mona
called?
Lisa
Yeah,
touch.
Mona Lisa. We
Mona
talked
Lisa
about that
touch.
last time.
Yep.
Laser rejuvenation for your
Right.
vagina, which is inside.
Right.
And I have read that it's important to use lube even when you're in your 20s and 30s, that lube is really good for you and you should be using it at any stage in your life. I think that there's some really good lubes that are out now that are not the kind that you used to get, like Astroglide. And there's some lubes that are really, soothing and full of
the right pH.
pH balance.
Yeah,
and they're really good for you. So check those out.
Yep.
And I just think intimacy is just important for touch and also for sleep. And they say that sex and orgasm helps our longevity, and touch and releasing oxytocin and feeling good. So it's really great to hear that there are solutions for women throughout their life. So as we wrap up, I would love just to hear some last minute ideas, things that you care about, like some messages that you want to leave the women who are listening to this podcast. Because last time you had a lot of people listening. That means that they dedicated an hour to listen to us of their life. And we are appreciative because we want to get these messages out to you. It's really important to us. I don't know, for me, it's my purpose, and it feels really good to deliver this to my audience. So are there any messages that you want to leave our listeners for thriving in midlife and beyond?
I mean, I think one of the most important issues is to remember that now that you have raised your family and you're about to launch them, that now you can be the priority. It can be the priority whether or not you want to, do a laser, whether or not you want to get your hair dyed, whether you want to actually start a marathon. The reality is you have as much life ahead of you at menopause as you did before. And let's make it be as great as it can be. And that means addressing the issues that could come to us down the pike before they happen.
Yeah.
And so that is a pivot into prevention that we all owe ourselves.
I love that message. I love it because I am living my best life right now. I really feel that way. And I do feel I have all the players, all the people that can help me do that, like you said. And I am working on prevention. So that is just amazing advice. Well, thank you again, Dr. La Follette. I really appreciate your time. I hope we have you on again. I'll have to let you know how the show goes. Can you please tell our listeners how they can get a hold of your practice?
Right. So my practice is called Lizellen La Follette, and I'm in Green Bay, California, which is in Marin County. And I am still in private practice and doing both OB and GYN. I'm hoping that eventually my OB time will be done and I can focus on longevity. But I have a private practice. We answer the phone. You don't get a recording and you don't have to hit 1, 2, 3, 4. But it is, since it's a person answering, it can be a little challenging and take a little time to get in. But I'm delighted to see people, and I'm obviously seeing patients.
Thank you so much once again. I've loved this time with you.
Thank you very much. We got a lot done.
Thanks for listening to Talk with Tara. If you love today's episode, please follow the show and share it with a friend. Stay tuned. There's so much more to talk about. See you next time.